I recently became a full-time entrepreneur. I was a sidepreneur. I had a 9 to 5, and I was closing these deals in between that 9 to 5 or that 5 to 9 and on the weekends. But I started closing deals 2 years into the business. The first year was just trying to gauge if this was something that had value. I knew it had value to us, but did have value to my customer, which is also the B2B businesses that invest, the corporate sponsors. Was this audience enough for me to build a company around? Because that's the other thing you have to figure out. Like, are there enough people that would buy this that I could actually go through the extra mile and make this into an incorporated and get the legal things set up? And like, I had to first test the waters. If I test the waters for a while, then I thought, okay, yes. Then I started to see that there were companies wanting to have conversations with us. Okay. And then the deal sizes started to grow a little bit. And when those deal sizes grow, that's more conversation, more legal support you need to make sure those contracts are tight. You need more administrative support. And so that was the point where I said, okay, I need to bring someone on. This has the potential to be a really large enterprise.
You're listening to the Black to Business Podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall. Welcome back to the Black to Business Podcast. So today's conversation is all about sales. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess and say you probably immediately thought about one of those late night infomercials where they're selling something or somebody getting hung up on. Or maybe the first thing that came to your mind when I said sales was hearing no, being rejected, followed by fear. Now, if you can relate to any of those feelings, you are not alone. The thing is, most entrepreneurs avoid the sales side of their business because it means facing rejection. It means that you're likely going to get hung up on or being told no. I mean, who wants to go through that? Nobody. And you already know Black folks do not like asking people for money. I'm totally generalizing here, but most of us don't. However, the reality is that sales is at the core of every business, and you have to sell something to keep the doors open. Not only does having a strong sales foundation give your business a reliable source of income, it also validates your business model, letting you know how your business is doing and where you can focus your growth. I know that unless you have a background in sales, it can be intimidating. And in the words of today's guest, there's a lot of fear around sales because it feels personal. Well, I'm here to give you a little tough love and let you know that it might feel personal, but it's not personal. I'm also here to let you know that we got your back. That's why today we've invited Chantel George on the show to show you how to master the art of sales, because there's definitely an art to selling. We don't want you out here sounding like a sleazy salesperson, and we definitely don't want you out here getting doors slammed in your face, whether it's virtually or in person. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about Chantel. Chantel is the founder of Sistas In Sales, the largest global organization for women of color in sales. She founded Sisters In Sales out of a determination to promote, support, and encourage women of color in sales across all industries. Sisters In Sales partners with Fortune 500 companies, tech startups, and consulting businesses to help them attract, hire, and retain women of color sales professionals. Her work experience spans from public relations for Bond Fund, an international cognac company, to a 4-year tenure at Yelp as a senior account executive. Chantel was also able to successfully raise $1 million in 6 months. Talk about receipts. So in our conversation today, she's actually going to share with you exactly how she did it and how you can too. During this episode, we're discussing the power of storytelling in sales, why you don't actually have to be the one doing the selling in your business, and how to decide when to hire for your sales team and how to train. We're also going to talk about how to create your outreach and target strategy and some tips for crafting and developing a good pitch. Chantel is also going to dive into how to deal with fear and rejection in sales and why getting a no isn't always a bad thing. Now, let's dive in. Chantel, welcome to the Black to Business podcast. Such a pleasure to have you here. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, before we dive into today's discussion, I would love it if you could share with my audience a little bit about you, who you are, what is it that you do in your business, and how did you get where you are today?
Ooh, okay. Large questions, but it's okay. I appreciate it, and I appreciate being here with you.
Of
So,
course.
um, my name is Chantel George. I am the CEO and founder of Sistas In Sales, which is the largest and fastest growing community that serves specifically women of color in corporate sales. And I got here due to my interest and curiosity in community building. I professionally have worked in sales since I would say for about maybe 15 years or so now. But
Hmm.
before that, when I was a wee child, um, I, I was born here, but my family's from the Caribbean. And
Okay.
as a first generation American, I watched how my mother and my father leaned on their community to make things happen.
Hmm.
All of our like needs came from other Caribbean or West Indian people. The person who fixed the roof, the person who went to my uncle for to fix our car. Like they taught me the importance of growing up a community, maintaining that community, and then
Hmm.
having that community serve them. So I took those learnings and I went and I started my career. I realized there are not a lot of Black women in corporate sales, and I used that same technology, if you will, that I learned from my parents, and I created a community to help myself thrive and to help others thrive. And now here we are. We have over 7,000 members in 38 countries that I've been building this for 6 years.
Wow.
And, I use mediums like conferences and monthly events to continue to build community. But I think the most
Hmm.
um, surprising, I would say, result of all of this was the fact that what I wanted wasn't in a silo. Thousands of other women wanted it too. So, um,
Right.
thankful that I've been able to build something like this. But, you know, as a CEO, I wear a lot of hats, and I often manage a lot of different levers at the same time. Our business operations, as well as working with marketing, as our sales team, our finance operations, and everything has to hum and it all has to make sense and defy the odds that women owned and Black owned businesses can be excellent. So that's it in short.
Love it. Such a beautiful story. And what I love about your story also is the fact that, so when I was doing my research, one of the reasons that I noticed that you also started your business was not only because there aren't enough Black women, women of color in corporate sales, but you also saw the fact that we're successful in business. Like, why isn't this translating or transferring over into corporate America? If you can just talk about like your thought process behind that, because I was very intrigued by that.
Yeah, that's a point that I have been curious myself. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, that's the other reason. And, to your point, a secondary reason why
Mm-hmm.
I built this community, I would say there were so many corporate politics that
Mm-hmm.
came up while I was working as a seller that I couldn't have imagined.
Yeah.
It was it part of the reason why I like sales. So just take a step back, and I think
Mm-hmm.
this is why a lot of other people like sales. It's a meritocracy.
Mm.
If you close business, you move forward. If you hit your quota, there's really not much someone can say to you. So, in a
Right.
way, when I entered the career, I thought this is a really safe place to be because it's performance based.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Until I realized that even in a performance based space, there can still
Yeah.
somehow be reasons why you can't get ahead, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
It
And
doesn't.
so that's what ended up happening. I saw other people around me getting promoted. I saw other people around me their titles changing. I looked up and I realized that I was getting left behind
Mm-hmm.
in this rat race. And so I had to have a come to Jesus moment. And I was like, no, it's not me. I've
Mm-hmm.
built and I've been around other women of color that have built businesses, that have instincts, that have hustle. I know it's not us, but
Right.
somehow these conversations that are happening behind closed doors, these unofficial rules, even as far as who gets better territories were happening, and those conversations were happening with white men and white men alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really discouraging to know that your performance couldn't get you where you wanted to be. And I was determined to figure out how we can unlock that for ourselves.
Yeah, sadly, sadly, sadly. I'm glad that you are doing the work that you are doing now. So, also, I want to dive into now, how did the conference start? Like, you started with a bang. You had the support of Salesforce behind you. So, like, how did all this start?
Okay, I love that question. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a dinner, I had a dinner, and I was not
Uh-huh.
going to make a conference. It was just a dinner to test the concept. It was in Harlem, New York, and there were 10 women, but I only knew half, and everyone else was a plus one. Had this dinner, I look
Mm.
around the room, and I'm like, okay, I could see me doing this maybe a couple times a year in this format. Like, those are the thoughts racing through my head.
Yeah.
Um, I have questions to ask these women just to gauge the viability of the business or the viability of my idea. And
Mm-hmm.
they seemed so at home with one another that I was shocked. I was like, this is great, but also this is working very, very well, And so then I was like, okay, I'm inspired, but let's continue seeing what can be done here. So I made some business cards. I continued networking, and
Mm-hmm.
someone at the company that I worked for sent me an invite to this Women in Sales event. And I went there, and myself and my friend, we were the only Black women in the room.
Wow.
And I remember striking up a conversation with this VP at Salesforce. Her name is Amy Frank. I'll never forget her.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I'm starting this concept, this idea. I had a dinner. I'd love to see, like, if, what do you think? Pretty much kept it open ended. And she said, man, I got a seller on my team. She's a Black woman. I'm trying to figure out how to relate to her. I'm trying to figure out how I can support her. Would you take a call with her? I said, of course. I took the
Very.
call with her. It was fine. Like, I gave her some confidence and things to think about. And then I remember just reaching back out to her and being like, hey, I had the call. It was great. I hope everything is well with you. And she said, yes, it is. And she said, what's next for you? And I said, well, I mean, I hadn't even pinpointed when we were going to do another event. And she was like, well, why don't you do an event here at Salesforce?
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And
Wow.
connected me with the hospitality person, and I put together the concept, and they were like, listen, we're going to give you this space, but just this space. And I said, all right, but that's all I need. Just give me the space. And it's funny because 6 years later, I could never just say that at this point, but yes, at that time, give me the space. Got the space. I reached out to a few Black caterers, and I reached out to those that would create a really nice experience. So there were like
Mm-hmm.
chocolate covered strawberries, we had wine, we had a charcuterie board, like really nice. I curated the panel, and I curated a panel to really expose the unique differences and challenges and similarities between technology businesses and
Mm-hmm.
working in sales and technology, and working in sales in more legacy companies. And I called it the common denominator. And so I had like two panels and about 45 minutes each with two different like groups of women. So it was interesting to see the contrast, just to kind of give people perspective.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that would blow up because over 150 people showed up after, and we had no
Wow.
website, we had no Instagram, we just had this concept. And it was there I actually realized the power of content, because content and information is very important and valuable. So just the concept really got
Mm-hmm.
so many people out. And so much so, we had the chief diversity officer of LinkedIn in the room, senior executives from recruiters from Spotify, Oracle. Like, how do these women even know who I am? And
Mm-hmm.
so It was really incredible. And I think back at that a lot. But after I did that, there was just no turning back. There was
Yeah.
no other way to go but forward. So that panel was a success. Then later on that year, I said I need to have a larger event at a more neutral place so that I can, eventually work with other partners. And I did that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just kept doing that type of event. I had that larger event at the end of every year.
Mm-hmm.
And that became kind of a staple for me. So that's how it started.
Wow, that is the power of walking in the purpose, but also the connections, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of, so you also recently had the Sisters in Sales conference that you had Academy Award nominated and Golden Globe winning actor, writer, and producer, Miss Taraji P. Henson. Like, how did this happen? And well, I know how it happened because you have the track record, but how was this experience? And tell me how this came about.
Well, what happened was that we realized that sales and working in corporate spaces was more than just your job. It also
Mm-hmm.
impacted your mental health, your well-being, your families, your friends. It just your life is so holistic,
Yeah.
and your need for content is holistic too.
Mm-hmm.
So as the conference continued to evolve, it started to become obvious we needed a track on mental health. And Taraji P. Henson actually has a lot of experience in building a mental health foundation on the
Mm-hmm.
importance of therapy and taking care of your mind. And so while I was thinking and just for some real talk, I wasn't sure if I wanted to have a celebrity. I've
Mm.
been really married to the fact that we're going to talk about important things. We're going to make
Mm-hmm.
sure we're not buying into any type of hype. Like this
Yeah.
is business, and we're going to get to the point. And so it took me a while to really consider what value could like a major celebrity do for us, because I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't sure yet. But after listening and researching more about Taraji's story, after thinking about the importance of our audience hearing someone who has overcome so much, I was
Yeah.
very like determined then, yeah, this story needs to be told at this sales conference. So
Mm-hmm.
thankfully we were able to get in touch with her people, and then from there, got her to speak on the last day, and she just bared her heart and
Oh,
opened her heart to us. You could have heard a pin drop. She
wow.
talked about her story. She talked about her challenges. She talked about things she tells herself when she looks in the mirror. And even though she doesn't come from a sales background, it didn't matter. We all knew what that felt like.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about her relationship. She talked about all that glitz is not glamorous. I mean, she just went there. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
spoke with her on a one-on-one interview, I was afraid. I was nervous. I was like, I'm gonna sit with Taraji, this is very, very close and very intimate. Like,
Right.
we're an arm's reach away from each other. And I will never forget, like, she looked into my eyes in a way that was just like, I'm not better than anybody else here. I am
Mm-hmm.
human. These like I'm present with you. And it really
Right.
did encourage me to ask her the questions I had, on my little note card. And it was a really awesome experience. I'll never forget it. But thank you for asking.
Yeah, I had a couple of friends that went and they just raved about it. Like, and I just saw the content also. So I was like, I could just tell, just for looking. But even I had people close to me that were like they had a great experience. So
Oh,
yes.
good.
Yeah. And so also one of the things that you've been also able to do is, the growth and the impact with the brand, but you were also able to successfully raise $1 million in 6 months. How,
Yes.
like, what period was this? And then what did you do to do that?
This was the beginning of the year last year.
Mm-hmm.
We had just finished the virtual conference the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And I, came to the table with some of our long-standing corporate partners, and I was like, listen, I know you've seen us virtually. We were virtual for 2 years. We're going to go really big this year. We're going to go bigger and better. And, we really need your support. And
Mhm.
it was, I think, off the strain of the relationship, professionalism, and the broader mission and the storytelling behind what we're trying to accomplish that
Yeah.
had our four largest partners, Google, Walmart, Amazon, and Microsoft,
Mhm.
all came in and really made it happen. So it was almost like sight unseen, like being
Yeah.
transparent, because you're going from a virtual engagement that was going on for 2 years, and then the largest ever conference we've ever put together in year 5.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's going to be great. And I know you've never seen something like this before, but I promise it's going to be great. And we were able to get all of that support. So everyone was really happy. I'll never forget
Mhm.
Microsoft sent 60 people, 60 of their employees from Costa Rica,
Wow.
Dublin, South America.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Again,
amazing.
just off the strain that this is an important topic. This is an important
Mhm.
space. We are somehow being overlooked in the conversation, and so that's what happened.
So beautiful. I love it. I love it. And so, Chantel, as someone who started their career in like B2B sales to you're now selling within your own company, what would you say it takes to be successful at selling within business?
Um, well, I can't do things the way I do when I'm only working for myself, I guess. Like sometimes like when I was an individual contributor and when I was not responsible for a team, I
Mhm.
would do things my own way, have my own like gut instinct as to when I should reach out or when I should do this email or whatever. And that's not really sustainable and scalable because right now I'm
Mhm.
overseeing 3 sellers and a junior seller. So I can't just do things when the when the wind takes me. I have to be a lot
Right.
more regimented, and I have to be a
Mhm.
lot more structured so that I can run the sales team. So the thing is, when you've been doing something for a long time, you
Mhm.
have your own instincts, but that's for your own number. I need to know what the revenue is across all of those individuals for the business at any given time. And
Right.
so they have to be, and we have to be really good at reporting up what we're working on, what deals are near close, because without that level of visibility, I can't do bigger things for the brand and I can't forecast well enough. So now I'm beginning to see how and why my old sales managers in the past were trying to get me to put in my forecasting numbers because it has such a big effect
Yeah.
on the business.
Yeah. And speaking of that, because a lot of people who are listening are likely a team of one, so a small and mighty team of one. What do you say about people stating that the first salesperson in the business should be you? So, do you believe that, and why or why not?
I think the first storyteller should be you
Mm,
because you're the one with the concept and the idea, but you
yeah.
don't have to be the one doing the selling. Like you can come on and explain the vision and then
Hmm.
let someone else go through the actual process, which is okay, here's a contract, here's let's get it finished, like more of the administrative side. But then
Hmm.
eventually you should hope to raise that person up to even tell your vision, sometimes even better than you can tell it yourself. That's happened to me before many times. But
Hmm.
I would say if you have the ability to bring someone along the journey with you from the onset to be your co pilot as a salesperson, you should do that. Because the longer you have someone working with you on the sales piece, the better and easier it will be for them to run by themselves.
Mm, okay. And I do want to talk about like more about your early days to when you segued into adding to your team. So, what would you say your experience as a team of one was? And then also for those who are listening, like determining when is the right time to hire or outsource those sales?
Well, I was a team of one probably for maybe less than a year because
Hmm.
the thing is, the first year, so let me break it down another way. I was a
Okay.
sidepreneur for
Okay.
for a few years. I recently became a full-time entrepreneur. I was a sidepreneur. I had a 9 to 5 and I was closing these deals in between that 9 to 5 or that 5 to 9 and on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But I started closing deals 2 years into the business. The first year was just trying to gauge if this was something that had value. I knew it had
Mm-hmm.
value to us, but did have value to my customer, which is also the B2B businesses that invest, the corporate sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
Was this audience enough for me to build a company around? Because that's the other thing you have to figure out. Like, are there enough people that would buy this that I could actually go through the extra mile and make this into an incorporated and get the legal things set up? And like, I had to first test the waters. If I test
Mm-hmm.
the waters for a while, then I thought, okay, yes. Then I started to see that there were companies wanting to have conversations with us. Okay. And then the deal sizes started to grow a little bit. And when those deal sizes grow, that's more conversation, more legal support you need to make sure those contracts are tight. You need more administrative support. And so that was the point where I said, okay, I need to bring someone on. This has the potential to be a really large enterprise, and I can't do it alone. So I would say the indicator for me was like the complexity of the sales cycle. That was what indicated that I needed some support. And then when I did get that support, that person shadowed me for a while before they went on their own, which is what I was saying earlier.
Such good advice. Okay, got it. And so, Chantel, you do come from a background of sales, and many people, they don't have that experience with sales, B2B directly. And of course, this is the Black to Business podcast, so we're dealing with business owners learning how to sell. So what would you say are some tips for people who have those fears of putting themselves out there? Because, of course, you're going to deal with rejection, but also some of those mindset shifts that need to take place.
I would say that like there's a lot of fear around sales because it feels personal,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're one person show. Someone doesn't buy, let's say, a craft or a particular product you've made, maybe even in your house for someone, you're trying to sell it at a farmer's market or something, and someone doesn't buy it. I
Mm-hmm.
can totally understand how that would feel very painful, and how you can get that feeling can make you want to isolate yourself. But I think that for me, what keeps me going is that this is a no for now. They are going to see the value. I mean, this has been a 6-year journey. If I had
Mm-hmm.
given up in year one, I would have never realized my full potential. And I think I'm not saying you should sell something that's clearly not making any inroads, but even one deal is something worth analyzing and understanding and turning back to when you get a bunch of no's. Someone saw potential in me. Someone saw potential in this. I just need to continue finding more of those types of people, because not everyone, even for Sis, is a buyer. We have a lot of people that are not buyers for us. While we had 28 sponsors last year, there are hundreds of thousands of businesses in the world that may not think we're the right fit, and that's okay. But the 28 out of those 100,000 are the ones that we spend the most time understanding and finding complementary businesses to them, so that we can continue finding more yeses. So I would say focus on the yeses, don't focus on the nos, because the yeses are where your future customers are coming from. That will get you confidence, and that'll make you feel more settled as a seller.
Love it. And one of the things I also love that you also talk about is how no isn't always a bad thing. So I want to talk about how people can use this as an opportunity for improvement and also getting insights in some of the ways that you've done that.
Well, I think that if you let no be the end of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
especially as you're growing your own business, you will not get valuable feedback that people who don't say no and just ghost you'll never hear from. Like, you need feedback, right? No is an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for feedback. I'd rather someone say no and then me say, but why? And then get those 2, 3 sentences of gold so that I can adjust, so that
Mm-hmm.
anybody else who may have been hiding that no from me will not see my pitfall before. So I think that's the biggest thing. Feedback is a gift. You need that it may be painful to receive at first, but you need that so that you can improve. Even for my audience, like I will send out like surveys and to the community, and they'll tell me some things that like at first I'm like, oh, for example, at the conference we had jollof rice, we had curry chicken. We tried to create some cultural moments with food.
Mm-hmm.
I believe someone in a survey said, I didn't really like the food. Like it should have just been a sandwich. And I was like, oh, but they didn't understand. We spent so much time on the culture food. And, it's like, hey, maybe that person likes it, but didn't want to bust down some curry chicken while they were at a conference, which is fine.
Yeah.
And that's a good take. And I need to hear those takes. So,
Mm-hmm.
rejection is always an opportunity for information.
Well said. And Chantel, one of the things you also spoke about earlier is the power of storytelling. I want to go into that a little bit more because you also said like maybe you should be the first storyteller in your business. So let's talk about like what role storytelling plays in selling and how you've personally found it to be true, or some tips on how others can use their story to sell.
Well, so it's interesting. If you are a business owner, that's analogous to me with the visionary. There's something that happened in your life that gave you the idea that you can create something that no one else in the world has created the way you created it. So you have to explain that vision because you'll never know who else can relate to that vision. But it's the story of how you uncovered the hole or the niche in the market that's the most interesting. And when I was preparing to do a large pitch for a bunch of partners, I remember meeting with a coach who, kind of dissected the way that I was presenting the conversation. First, I was going to say, my name is Chantel, I'm the CEO, and I want you to support our conference. But she said, start with the aha moment that had you realize that this was an important business to start and to run. And using psychographics. And so what she said, her name is Quinn Conyers, I'll never forget it. She said, explain to them what it felt like to walk into a room where you felt isolated. And when I started speaking about it, it really transported me there. And then it transported other people there too. I'm 5'9", I'm voluptuous. And when I have heels on, I'm closer to 6 feet. And when I walk into these happy hours that are pretty stiff and conservative, I feel like I stick out like a sore thumb. I'm balancing a glass of wine. I'm trying to keep my calm, contain my nerves, and like just kind of explaining what that felt like. Only you can explain that because not everyone is 5'9" and voluptuous and in these spaces all at the same time. So you need to transport someone to where you were when you had the idea to start whatever it is that you started, so we can feel what you felt and be there with you. And then we'll understand why you built what you built. So I think having some of those coaching opportunities really transformed the way that I centered myself and the way that I told my why. And so hopefully that's helpful to your listeners.
Yes, I love that example. Great. And so let's talk about now getting to the yes. So, of course, everything starts with a strategy. What I want to ask, do you think cold calling, cold emailing, like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're selling. So if you're selling something that it has like a wide audience that can buy it and they're reachable on the phone, sure. For what I'm doing, it's very difficult to get someone's phone number, like the head of D&I at Microsoft, for example. Their phone number is not just floating around. But like I would say if you're selling, like if somebody cold called me right now and said, I have a corporate, like there is actually a business I'm considering. I have a corporate gifting package that you can buy that specifically is made of Black owned businesses that you can that you can gift to your clients around Christmas time. I would be open to that. It solves a need. I'm the decision maker. And, I know how to apply that. So I just think it depends on what you're selling. I think it depends on if your audience is reachable through this medium. I've cold called throughout most of my career. I used to make 80 to 100 calls a day, but I was calling restaurant owners. You can get their information easily. So it just depends. I wouldn't hinge my business on cold calling if most of your audience don't have their phones listed or accessible. I would get very good at sending good emails.
Mm-hmm.
and research-based emails. And I would follow them. I would do something called social selling, which is following them on LinkedIn, watching what they post about, finding their podcast. So if someone was to sell to me, something that sets them apart would be if they listen to a podcast I've spoken on and they can refer to something I've said. So it just depends on what you're selling and who your audience is. But cold calling is definitely not dead. It just depends.
Got it. And now let's talk more about developing that strategy. So, what would you say are some of the tips for creating an outreach strategy and kind of like your target list, like who you're going to reach out to and when?
Well, I have different tiers. So like we have the like most tier one businesses, which are like businesses that check the boxes for us. They have big diversity pledges. They have a need, like I can go on their website and see that they're looking for salespeople. Those two things would put them at the top of our list. Then we have a middle group where we believe that they have the resources to support us, but maybe they don't have the need for sellers right now, but still we can get into their ecosystem. And then the third group where they're not necessarily in either bucket. And I feel like you can kind of use that rationale for really any group. Like there's always going to be a tier one, tier two, and tier three approach for anything that you do. And it's important to secure the tier one, but sometimes a lot of your money comes from tier three. So just trying to work all angles. When your sales team becomes more sophisticated, you can actually just designate someone to work each of those groups independently so that they're all working at the same time. So that's why you have a junior seller that's going after some people and trying to evangelize to them. They maybe feel like a long shot, but let's just give it a try. You have a mid group that might be for some more experienced sellers that know how to take someone who has a bit of a need and turn it into a deal. You have a more strategic group for a strategic seller who's willing to put in the work to crack that open. So as you build your sales team, you're going to realize that you need to segment it and then maybe segment your sales team to get to the goal.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, I like that. Okay, so now let's talk about developing a great pitch. So if you could just talk about some of the tips on crafting a pitch, like an outreach pitch, like what are some of the key things that you're going to include into a pitch that you want to corporate sponsor?
Well, I start with what you believe they need. That comes from research. So, I mean, we have a very specific goal, and we believe that every business should have the same goal. So, in other words, a pitch would be we take some assumptions. You need to make some assumptions in a pitch. We know that diversity inclusion, for example, is a very important part of every business. We also understand that women, especially Black women, are the fastest growing of entrepreneurs. We want your support to help these skilled women who work in corporate sales that have the aptitude and the acumen to enter in your sales force to help you with your diversity and inclusion goals. So it's like assumption is like we knew, we have, we want. You want to use that language, to that affirmative action language, to push the pitch forward and also to push your agenda forward. The thing is, if your pitch is not strong enough, it doesn't give anyone anything to react to. I'd rather, going back to the no, I'd rather someone saying, absolutely not. We definitely don't want more women of color in sales. Like, because then I could be like, well, why? But if you're too ambiguous, then you don't actually get any feedback. And sometimes you just end up getting ghosted because no one knows what you're trying to do.
That's good. And another thing that I love that you spoke about on one of your interviews is how to actually close the deal. So call to action, closing the deal. Like, what is your advice on that?
Well, for me, most of the times you don't ask for it. Like I've spoken about this before. I remember my first sales job. I read the script. I was like, and this is what it cost. And that's when I ended the sentence. This is what it cost. And then I just waited. And I remember my manager at the time wrote on a Post-it note, let's get started. and put it in front of my computer. That back then I was doing phone sales. So it was just me talking into the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, as like scarily, let's get started. And the person on the other line was like, okay. And I was like, oh, wow. I mean, we would have just sat in silence. So I think a lot of us don't ask for the business.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just say, let's get started after we're done going through a proposal. And we just end up in this weird space where we let the prospect or the potential buyer determine what to do next. You're the
Mm-hmm.
one getting on the phone to sell them. You got to tell them, let's get started. You got to add that friction. Without that friction, there's nothing, there's no conversation, there's no dialogue. So at the end of you presenting pricing, at the end of you going through that wonderful pitch that's very strong, just remember those three words. Let's get started. And that's when the conversation opens up.
Love that. And I want to also end it with talking about the role that community and also patience has played into this. So one of the things that I saw was that one of your deals, like with Amazon, it took you 2 years, you said?
Yes.
Talk about that and having that patience and persistence through that process.
I would say that for me, I knew it was a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I knew that we were on to something, and I knew that the value of what we were bringing to the table was only going to be something that, like, a company who cared about progression and innovation could not ignore it. And so I was like, look, I remember telling myself, if we don't get this deal, I'm going to continue to invite our stakeholder to the events.
Mm-hmm.
I kept inviting her to the events. I kept asking her if she wanted to bring her team. I sent her tickets. I sent her happy holiday emails. I'm just going to keep inviting her. I'm going to make sure she gets our content. And eventually, it'll come around, and it did. So again, like, if you're treating people respectfully and they give you a reason why no, sometimes maybe the no is just not the right time. Don't not talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Keep talking to them, keep inviting them, keep sending them things. Keep reminding them that you are not a one-hit wonder, that you're here, and that when they're ready, they can pick up the pieces and move forward.
Yeah. I love that advice. And I also recently experienced something like that with a company. I was on the phone with one of their reps and we were connecting, but during the process, I just felt like I said, this is going to be one of those, like, it's going to take some time. You got to build a relationship. So it's going to take patience, but I definitely felt like that in that moment. I just knew it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
And it's about relationships too. I like that you mentioned that because a lot of people don't think about it's not just, one time asking for something, it's building relationships a lot of time as well.
Exactly. And, people want to see that you're going to continue doing what you're doing. Like, what if, you did this event and you got them all wrapped up and then you didn't do it again next year? Like, that's their brand. That's their career. That's their livelihood. I mean, there's a lot that's attached to their vote of approval. And you have to remember that.
Yes. Chantel, this has been awesome. So I want to talk about what is next for you, what's next for Sistas In Sales, like what's coming up, what are some of the things that you all are working on?
Catch us at South by. We're going to be at South by Southwest in a couple weeks. We're going to have a bunch of dinners in Chicago and DC. We're going to be across the pond in London and Ghana. We have our 6th annual summit in New York from the September 21st to September 23rd. Come find your next best sales hire. Come support what we're doing. And, I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story today.
Of course. And you are doing amazing things. I do want to ask you now, how do you stay organized, sane? Like, is it some tools, some self-care things that you do, resources? What is it that keeps you sane, organized, all that stuff?
Great question. I started to actually really pay more attention to that. I have a business coach that I work
Mm-hmm.
with weekly, and so she helps me prioritize like the larger things that I'm working on. I take time. I stop working at 6, sometimes 7, the latest, and I watch reality TV to just shift
Mm.
my brain. So I love Love Island. That's like my new like show. I watch that
Oh.
show. I also like plan a lot further in advance because I used to just kind of work like day to day, week to week. Now I'm like, nope, I need to make sure there's a vacation. I have my
Mm-hmm.
vacations planned out for the rest of the year. I have everything that I can look forward to planned out. Last year, I went on a retreat after the summit. I'm like, that was a great idea. I'm doing that again. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different things that I'm doing to just future proof myself because you know that there are times in the year you'll be more stressed than other times. Just get ahead of
Yeah.
it. And getting ahead of it has really helped me.
Great advice. And speaking of shows, so let's get into the not so serious business round. I want to ask you now, which TV show do you wish still aired?
Um, I that's a good question. Oh, I like all these different TV shows. I like King of the Hill.
Okay, that's a
I
good
like
one.
animation. So like I love the animated shows. I think The Simpsons
Mm-hmm.
is still on. I don't know if they're still doing new episodes or not, but I love that show. Like I just love like I loved animation. I think it's quirky, it's funny. Like I like light humor, things that like to your
Mm-hmm.
point allow me to like, do something that's not always rooted in business all the time.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So what's the most randomest social media account that you follow?
I follow people that I follow like influencers that I guess like travel influencers that go to interesting places around the world. But I'm not sure if
Mhm.
that's random. I feel like a lot of people follow that for inspiration. Um, I like to like in the future I want to have a family. So right now I'm
Mhm.
following this woman who has 9 kids, and I'm just
Wow.
watching her and her routine. Like she makes like all this food and
Mhm.
has to have all these things organized. I'm like, I don't want that many kids, but like how fascinating. And she's a content creator. Like, so those
Wow.
are things that kind of take me out of my day to day that has me
Yeah.
fantasize.
Yeah, nice. That's beautiful. Okay, so shout out a fellow Black woman-owned business.
I'm gonna continue to shout out this particular one, Village. It's actually what I was describing before. It's a corporate gifting kit that has Black
Mhm.
owned items in it, Black and women owned items in it. And I think it's a great way to gift your clients, to gift people that you really want to stay connected with. I mean, who doesn't like a thoughtful gift?
Mhm.
So I love what she's doing there.
Love it. And finally, what does it mean to you to be Black in business?
Oh, I think it means like holding myself to a high standard. Like we all know that's a part of it.
Mhm.
But it's also, I'm living in my childhood home. My parents
Mhm.
both passed away. One, my dad recently, my mom when I was 9. And I don't know exactly what they would say if they would see me now, but I know they'd be proud of me. I
Mhm.
was able to renovate the house into something that was really comfortable for me. I've been able to be an entrepreneur and feed and pay myself off of my business. And I think I'm just really proud of myself, but more importantly, I feel like I've done right by them and their choice to come here and to make the quote unquote dream happen.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Love it. And Chantel, others are going to want to know how can they stay connected with you, how can they support you, and how can they find you. So please do share.
Well, they can find me on Instagram at Chantel Media. They can find my brand, Sistas In Sales, on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and the like. But follow me personally. I love that. I love followers. I also just love social media, but also follow, the brand because we're working on some pretty great things. We are closing out Black History Month with a bang. We are, getting prepared for the next set of months coming up. Women's Month, Juneteenth is around the
Mhm.
corner. So, and now that like the pandemic and what it feels like is somewhat behind us, I know people are itching to get out to meet new people, to get their social life back on track. So please stay connected to us.
Perfect. And we will definitely include all of those things in the show notes. Chantel, thank you so much for being on the Black to Business podcast. And we are so proud of you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wasn't that amazing? I love that Chantel shared her journey and how it all started with just a concept. That's a reminder that you don't have to have it all figured out. I also like that she shared the importance of patience. It took her 2 years to get Amazon to say yes. 2 years. That's patience, that's persistence, and that is admirable. You can learn more about Chantel and how to connect with her by visiting blacktobusiness.com/138. Also, I know lately I've been telling you who's coming up on the next episode, but for next week's guest, I actually want to keep it a secret. I know. It's because this guest for me was such a big deal. This was another one of those moments where I was just like, oh, we made it. People see us. So all I'm going to ask is that you just trust me on this one and meet me back here next week. Deal? Okay, good. Well, fam, I just want you to know that I am so proud of you for showing up and investing in yourself today, learning and finding out ways to improve. You are such a go-getter and a brave soul, and I can't wait to meet you back here on the show next week. Cheers.